Well, to talk us through much of this is Dan Perry. He is an Israeli affairs analyst. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Thanks very much for being with us, Dan. First of all, what do you believe was Netanyahu's goal behind bombing Qatar, a sovereign territory? Do you think it was to kill Hamas leaders or to blow up the ceasefire negotiations?
I think we sometimes risk overthinking. Netanyahu's goal is to basically get Hamas to surrender, get back the hostages, and compel the disarmament of Hamas. What he wants after that, no one knows, because he's standing in the way of the global preference for some version of the PA to enter Gaza in Hamas's stead. So was he trying to blow up the talks? Maybe, but I think mainly he was trying to kill every Hamas leader he can possibly get his hands on. I tend to think the simple answer is the more likely one.
But in going after Hamas at a sovereign territory like Qatar is, he's seen widespread condemnation from some of Israel's closest allies, including the United States. I mean, do you think Netanyahu has accurately calculated the possible consequences of this attack?
I am very, very cynical about Netanyahu's motivations and actions. I think his primary goal is to maintain his coalition. And so there is a reason to believe that his actions are aimed at prolonging the war, even at the risk of sacrificing the hostages. Indeed, that is why his government, his war policy, and he personally are all quite unpopular at this point in Israel. However, the contradiction is that the actual goals, which are the elimination of Hamas as a factor, military and governing in Gaza, are also widely supported. And that is why there's great confusion in trying to figure out Israeli public opinion, because it is fundamentally dualistic. Much of the answer to your question lies in a mystery that I cannot resolve. Was this truly opposed by the U.S.? Because it is very hard to believe that Netanyahu would launch an attack involving the Air Force on, as you say, a sovereign territory, but not just any sovereign territory. We're talking about Qatar, that is a major player in the Middle East, one of the two steady mediators, a country that hosts the largest U.S. airbase in the region for thousands of miles around, and whose airspace is basically protected by the U.S. So the idea that Israel will just blunder into attacking that territory without U.S. acquiescence seems fantastical.
But that's exactly what the United States has said, and that's what Qatar has accepted.
Yes. Okay. So we are left having to figure out which is less improbable. That Netanyahu would be crazy enough to do this, risking Israel's relationship with its primary patron, without which he cannot continue the war more than a few weeks, or that Trump is lying. Now, each viewer can do his or her calculation. I have my calculation. I strongly suspect that if the attack had been successful and had wiped out the entire leadership of Hamas abroad, Trump would be owning it.
Right.
And he'd even be hinting that Qatar was involved and daring Qatar to prove him wrong. I also suspect what happened is the U.S. did know about it, tipped off the Qataris, who tipped off the Hamas. Why Netanyahu took this gamble is a very open question, and I can tell you that he's being criticized for this, not just by most of the world and Qatar and the Arab world, including countries Israel needs on its side like Egypt, but also much of Israel. If you read the Israeli press, I mean, that's a very steady refrain in a weekend press, why this was done and whether the risk assessment was accurate.
Okay, given that, I mean, how far does Netanyahu, leaning on Trump's ultimate support, actually protect Israel, do you think, from the consequences of breaching, as we've said, the international law of sovereign lands?
I don't think Trump cares about international law at all, but he does care about his relationship with Qatar, and he certainly should care about looking so inept that he can't prevent two of the U.S.'s major allies, Qatar and Israel, from squabbling. Everyone looks bad here. Everyone. I mean, there are no innocence here, including, by the way, the idea that Hamas is a legitimate player and hosting them is okay in Israel. Even the people who oppose the violation of Qatar's sovereignty look askance at the idea that Qatar is hosting these Hamas leaders who are considered in Israel pretty much by everyone to be terrorist chieftains and not legitimate political players. I realize you can dispute that point, and I realize many people in the West would not agree with that. I may not agree with that, but it's a very widely held position, including in the West, and I dare say including in the Trump administration.
Well, they were here in Qatar, trying to mediate a ceasefire and try and bring an end to the war in Gaza.
I know. It's complicated.
Yeah, it certainly is. Dan, thank you for joining us. Fascinating to get your thoughts on this. Dan Perry for us out of Tel Aviv.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.